And welcome back to another YouTube video. And this video is part one of two of installing a motor on 2003 Honda Shadow 1100. I had posted two videos earlier on the engine removal. And to begin with, I'm going to lift the bike up with the chain wrapped around the frame with my engine hoist. And the motor itself I have sitting on a floor jack with a block of wood. And I'm going to try to wiggle it around and get it approximately where it's supposed to go in the bike. And eventually, once it's positioned, we can start lifting it up. This is probably one of the hardest parts of this installing this motor. Nevertheless, I have taken good quality 4K video of everything, so hopefully you can will help you positioning your motor in place, and perhaps you can watch what I'm doing, and maybe you even have a better idea. But there we're getting it close to where it's supposed to be. With a little bit of working back and forth, tilting the engine one way or the other. Without a doubt, the motor is a lopsided, clumsy. It wants to more or less, it's heavy on towards the front and not so much back towards the rear. I had actually initially tried using the transmission jack to put this back into place, but the jack, I couldn't get the motorcycle lifted high enough to utilize my transmission jack. So again, back down to the floor jack. The key right now is to get the in past the frame with the left crankshaft cover, but we did succeed. And now we got to get back around where we can get the drive shaft hooked back to the spindle there that comes out for transmission at the rear. Again, a combination of the motor and the gearbox all in one happy package. I'm going to try to show you a close up here sliding the drive shaft on this at the back of the motor. Although it's sort of hard with that rubber cover, but I'm going to do as good as I can. And there, if you take notice, it slid back in, so we have that in place. And we can just take, and once it starts on, you can just keep wiggling and jiggling, and you can feel it's going back into place. One thing about it, if you're not back in place, you're ever going to put this first bolt in. It holds the motor into place. If you're not back in far enough, you're not going to be able to start the bolt. Okay, there it's all about lined up. I'm going to see if I can slide the bolt in, and it slides in from the left side. The nut goes on the right side. There I have it started in. And I'm going to take, before we go the whole way in, there's a metal bushing. This goes in between as a spacer. Okay, good news, that slid in. Now we can start the nut on. Just hand tight for now because we have a whole lot more hardware and the subframe to put back in before we're going to tighten all the hardware up that actually holds the motor into place. Now I'm going to install the bottom, this bolt at the rear of the motor. This is the longest bolt, I think, on the whole bike, actually. I took a little bit there and tried to get it lined up, and I'm just tapping lightly with the hammer. It's going all right. A little light tapping is good. Now, on the other hand, if you come across the won't budge at all, and you have to really swing the hammer. Well, look, something's wrong. And again, we have same with the upper one. There's a metal spacer that goes in between, but first we have to line it up a little bit better and tap the bolt back out. I actually went in too far, and there is our metal spacer. And here I'm showing you an overhead view of it being positioned in place. And without a doubt, it's been a little contrary going in, but I'm using a punch here just to give a little bit of a slight pry on the motor towards the front of the bike. And now the bolt's tapping in. You can see it coming through, and there it is. And as before, now we can just take merely and start the nut on it, but don't tighten it just yet. And now with the back of the motor fastened back in place, we're going to put this front bracket that holds the motor to the frame in place. When I took it apart, I threaded the bolts into the top part where it bolts to the frame so I didn't mistake them for other bolts. And then I'm going to just take one. I'm going to first start one in on the engine itself, and then we'll line it up to the frame. And take notice, the bolts where it holds to the motor have larger washers molded on them than the ones where it would have bolted to the frame. And now to get the other one started in, I'm going to just use this pry bar with a little effort to, now we're going to put the one in up the frame and the bracket. All right, now we have a bolt on both sides of the bracket. And I'm going to take here and put another one, the last one in where it holds to the engine. Again, take notice of the large washer. Okay, good news. We're down to just putting the subframe in. And once the subframe's in, we can get the jack out of our way and be down to, which there's still a lot of stuff to do, but just basically hooking the rest of the wiring and cables and such up. But this is, again, the last sort of, again, main part that holds the motor in. And take notice, this upper part of the subframe is a nut and bolt. Now, the next part, it's actually threaded into the frame of the bike itself, which is what we're doing here at the back of the subframe down low. These bolts are a little tricky to start in because they go in like up on an angle, how the subframe, if you notice, it's like at a 45-degree angle roughly where it goes. Now I'm going to take now the Allen key and tighten this up some. I feel because of the front on with the nut and bolt in this, and I'm going to put the other one in at the rear of the subframe. And now with the rear of the subframe in place, I'm going to put the last nut and bolt in the upper part of it here. And it's wanting to be a little bit stubborn to go in, so I'll see if I can help it out a little bit with the ratchet and the Allen key and get it to thread through. And working on motorcycles and cars never ceases to amaze me. Now it seems with all the other ones in that should have been no problem, but you can never judge. It's again when you're working with metal, just the thousandths of an inch can make such a difference. But anyhow, we got it, and now we can turn the nut on it. Okay, now with that last nut on, we have one more long bolt, which I'll admit equally as long as the one that I said earlier is the longest. It goes across the front of the motor and through the frame and through the front of the motor with the longest spacers of all. It is a great idea, and I did so when I disassembled this on all this engine hardware with these bolts and spacers. As soon as I took one out, I kept it separate and is the position it came from and labeled it so I knew exactly which one it went back in. Okay, and as it's the back, just a little bit of encouragement to get the bolt to slide through. And with our subframe still loose yet, that was actually quite simple. And then we'll turn the nut on it a few threads. Alrighty, now back on the left side of the bike, we have a bolt here to put in before the foot peg and such goes in that you can access. And we're pretty close here. We can soon take and we'll be torquing all the bolts to the proper torque on the subframe and the engine mounts. On that subject, going to tighten the first one. This one goes to 29 foot-pounds. Furthermore, this one and the one down below we're going to be tightening gets torqued to 29 foot-pounds of the nut and bolt. And in my opinion, you can't beat a click-style torque wrench. I used the other type years ago, and I don't really think they are that accurate. And here's the last one. We're tightening to the 29 foot-pounds of the ones with the bolt and the nut on the end. Hey, now we're going to tighten the two Allen head keys at the back of the subframe, and these are also tightened to 29 foot-pounds. Now we're going to tighten the two at the upper part of the subframe, have to hold the nut on the back side, and these get torqued to 47 foot-pounds, unlike the other ones. Now finally we're going to tighten the ones the upper mounts at the engine, and these get torqued to 20 foot-pounds.